Once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latex gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast, guys. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. Just like Fry said, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Do the whole thing. That way, you're catching all of our videos. We'd appreciate that. Big Blue, my man, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We haven't done this in a while, but I want to say thanks to everybody that's coming in from all over the world. We got somebody from London, UK. And then we got somebody that was also from, I saw Kentucky in here. I just got to go back and find it, but nice to see y'all. Hopefully everything's all well where y'all from. There it is. Okay, what? Oh.
Is there an echo? Do you hear an echo, Blue?
No, not on my side.
Yeah, I don't hear one either. Let me know in the comment section if you guys are hearing an echo. I'd appreciate that. So, Big Blue. Today's topic. Hold on, I'm trying to fix this on my deal here so I can. There it is. All right, got it. All right, so today we're going back into the Bryan Kohberger case. It's been a minute since we talked about the case, given the fact that there's been a lot of other news that's gone on. Awesome. All our international viewers. That is amazing. But yeah, going back into the Bryan Kohberger case, we're actually going to get back into the Howard Bloom book. And I want to go to a specific part of the book that refers to some grand jurors, 2 of them specifically, that came forward and gave some detailed information about how the state is planning on prosecuting or trying Mr. Bryan Kohberger. Now, I'm going to say this book goes into saying that these grand jurors may have them or somebody they know may have gone up to Steve Goncalves. I have never heard that from Steve or Christy. They've never told me they spoke to any grand jurors or have any information from anybody from the grand jury. I've not asked them either. So I'll leave it at that. I don't know if this is real or not real. And to be honest with you, I'm not going to ask if it's real or not real. It's none of my business at this point. But it's in the book. I've heard some of these things in other ways. And so I want to comment on some of the things that I've heard and contrast it with what Howard Bloom has gotten from his sources. And then I'm also going to go into the back of the book and talk about where he got his sources, especially on the grand jury and that information from the grand jurors. So, and then afterwards, we might take a few calls. So let's get into this. So I'm going to start off. It's on page 200 of the book. And it goes, not all of Steve's investigative efforts had been in vain. He had assembled some blue chip sources that he revealed to several friends, including an FBI agent in St. Louis, who had shared his personal email so that his bosses in the bureau wouldn't learn that he was communicating with Steve. A handful of additional sympathetic law enforcement officers, and most helpful of all, a conduit of 2 of the grand jurors who had been on the panel that had voted in to indict Bryan Kohberger. So, according to the book, two individuals that were on the panel that indicted Bryan Kohberger made contact with Steve. Blue, what do you think about that, first and foremost, before we go forward with it?
Well, I'd say they might have had a little bit of contact with him, like maybe in the courtroom, if he was called in as
no, not in grand jury. No, this was
Oh,
in
no, it's a
grand jury.
private.
Yeah.
That's
Bryan Kohberger don't even know everything. Well, I think they do now, but at the time,
Yeah.
they didn't know anything about that or what was going on in it. I mean, I'm sure they were probably aware. No, it was a secret. Remember, it was a secret grand jury.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know where they would have met him unless they seeked him out. But who knows?
Yeah, that's possible. I don't know. I don't know if it's true or not. I honestly don't. So let's continue. This says, and in the process, he compiled some startling information or revelations, hard-won information that he triumphantly disclosed to his newfound internet associates. So this is going to kind of tell you where his source came from for this book. His internet sources. Now, I'm not one of, or associates. I'm not one of those associates that was privileged to this information. You know, I do talk to Steve. I talked to him just a couple days ago. And so he never told me these things. So it's possible he told others. I didn't start talking to Steve until more, not necessarily recently, but it was more recent than when I first started talking with Christy. Christy had emailed me because of her daughter's birthday coming up, and they wanted to do something special and wanted to put out, a flyer, in memory of Kaylee. And, we put that out there, and she'd seen our show and seen our content and was appreciative of the way we did our business. And so she began, to trust us, and we spoke here and there. And then I wanted to get Steve onto the show, and he's already sort of agreed. We just got to wait until certain things are done. From what I understand, he's like, not right now, but as soon as this event is done that he has to do, or that's going on, or maybe it's something with the hearings. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there was something specific, a specific date that has to happen. And then after that he'd be able to come onto the show. So, my correspondence with him, like I said, I have not asked him about grand jury or anything else or how he got information. So that is not me, but it sounds like perhaps somebody he did trust that was maybe, an internet associate, has backstabbed. Now, who do we know that talked to him outside of me? Because honestly, when this was going on, I hadn't talked to the Goncalveses when all this had gone down. So this was early on, and I think we know who talked to them, Blue, that were.
I'm trying to remember. I know it was what's her name?
Chronicles of Olivia.
Chronicles of Olivia. Yeah,
that's one. Then you had I've seen pictures with Steve and JLR. That's two.
Oh, that's right.
I know that there was claims from somebody named Brett Norton. So that's possibly three. Right. So I don't know if maybe there's more I'm not aware of. But those are the three that I'm aware of. Maybe, yeah, those are the only three I'm aware of that would be the internet associates. So interesting. Now, crazy thing though is in this book, Howard Bloom speaks about Chronicles of Olivia and Brett Norton. So you think that might be a clue? Maybe a little bit of one?
Maybe. I mean, he mentioned them out there, so maybe he was able to talk to them to get some of the information that they had privilege to.
Yep. All right. So this says that the grand jurors basically stated that Kohberger had purchased a dark blue Dickies long sleeve work uniform at the Walmart in Pullman not long before the murders. Steve had learned that the authorities had a copy of the $50 receipt, or it's $49.99 receipt, and they also had a theory to explain how Kohberger had managed to escape the crime scene without a scratch and without leaving an incriminating drop of blood in his getaway car or his apartment. He had worn the work uniform during the murders and then disrobed before he got behind the wheel of his Hyundai Elantra for his drive back to his apartment. Perhaps authorities hypothesized Then he stuffed the work suit into a plastic garbage bag and then shoveled it into his trunk. Now, this has been my theory since we found out there was no blood in the vehicle, right?
And that's always been my theory, is that he wore a suit, that he wore gloves, and he wore booties. That's my theory. And then to wear the hoodie, and if it had a drawstring and you can draw it tight enough so you won't drop any hair, then I think you covered all your bases to not leave anything behind.
Yeah, you definitely would. Thank you, Afton, for your gifted Drunk Turkey Show membership. Make sure you guys have your memberships turned on. If you're interested in joining, the join button is right there. And if you're on Apple, just click into the description. It'll say become a member. Click there. We're going to do a members show on Sunday. I'm not sure if Blue's going to be on that one or not, but I'll be doing a members show on Sunday. It's not going to be a members only video where only members are going to be able to watch, but it is going to be a members only chat. So we are going to allow everybody to be in on that live show on Sunday, but the entire show is going to be for the members as far as the live chat. We'll probably figure out a time I'll put in the community tab in the next day or so. All right, let's so what do you think about the grand jury talked about Kohberger possibly purchasing the Dickies long sleeve work uniform. What do you think about him purchasing that work uniform in Pullman?
Well, I don't know if there's a Walmart in the other town. Sometimes when they're so close to each other, there's only one Walmart because they can drive to each other. So.
Right, but I mean, he went shopping in different places. I think he was in the Albertson out there, in like Clarkston, Washington, and he said that the shopping was better in Idaho. So why there? I mean, it's kind of
to buy a suit like that. You wouldn't probably find it in Albertsons. It's just mostly groceries and like toy aisle. From the last Albertson I've been to, they never had clothes. And now they had a Tractor Supply or maybe a Fleet Farm.
Mm-hmm.
Or some northern stores that I remember. They carried overalls and they carried, all the work suits and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So Canadian True Crime Buff comes in with 5 Drunk Turkey Show memberships. She's a mod. She's a member. So is Afton. Thank you both. And another one of our mods and members comes in with another $5. Thank you so much. This the only place to be. Thanks, Daniel Jane Blue. Hugs to Rogie. Aw, dude, she's getting big. For those that don't know, my daughter is now, I think, the height of a 3-year-old, and she's only 14 months. She's in the 99th percentile in height, or at least like a 2.5-year-old. She is so tall. It's like we measured her about at 13 months, so that was on the 11th of last month. We measured her yesterday on the wall, over an inch in 1 month.
Oh, they grow quick, man.
I mean, she's getting up there. She's growing fast. All right, guys. Sorry to interrupt with my personal life. So, what is it? What do you think that means, though, Blue? That he purchased it only days before the murders. What does that mean? That it, why wasn't it purchased, way before? Why wasn't it purchased when he first decided he was going to do this? If he was driving around that place 12 times,
I think it's because he finally decided, it's coming up, time's coming up, and I need something to protect myself or cover myself. Or maybe he was going to try to take one from work, like the full suits, and he couldn't get it.
Right.
So
maybe
without it being noticed, and he's like, man, I'm going to have to buy one. But that's a crazy thing. Why buy it there in town? You could, maybe it's far to the nearest other Walmart. I don't know. I'll have to look it up there and see where they are.
Yeah, I just find it weird that he bought it at the nearest Walmart to the murder scene. I mean, I would assume that, hey, once you realize that, there's not much DNA from a perpetrator there, You know, let's just say the knife sheath wasn't even there, left there. You know, I'm gonna look for somebody purchasing some certain things like hazmat suits, stuff like that. You know, Dickies uniforms, and I'm gonna go through the Walmart and the local places for people that are buying those hunting knives. You know, Vans shoes, um, the any type of protective garment, whether it is the Dickies, you know, coveralls or some variation of those that are a generic brand. You know what I mean? Thank you, Steelers fan. My favorite mod and member, gifting 5 Drunk Turkey Show memberships. And for those that are wondering, that's my wife. That's why she's my favorite.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, it's a small town, it's a small area, so I'm pretty sure they may only have 1 or 2 Walmarts, and I think sometimes you want to, if you're thinking of those kind of criminal acts, you want to buy it more discreet, so you probably wouldn't be recognized. But you know, the receipts are going to show up on your credit card, so it's one of those things where you gotta think smarter in the system, man. You gotta pay with cash. You gotta use. Sometimes I would say use self checkout. There's always cameras, but it'd probably be.
But that's the thing. I mean, they're going to go through their series of everything is digitized now, right? So all they got to do is search up by the item, right? I'm going to search. I want to search of this, and this in the last 3 months. I want to see everybody that purchased that. And then you're going to get those receipts, copy those receipts, and even if they paid cash, let's say they went through that, well, you're going to have a login of that camera when they walk through.
No, but the thing is, he let himself more vulnerable because he probably used a card, and they checked his bank records, and then they saw what.
I heard, I don't know how true this is, but I heard the receipt and the tag, like from the inside of the tag, were together.
Yeah,
something like maybe perhaps a little. Well, that could have been his little memento. You know what I'm saying? Like, how could, like, nobody's found the Dickies clothes, right? There wasn't any indication of those things. So it's not like he was going to get captured because of that. Now, obviously, if they captured him and they found that, that's going to be a little bit more incriminating against him because he bought it just days before the murders, apparently, according to this book. They can't find it. I mean, that's the next sentence that comes out is, you know, only there was no sign of the Dickies outfit. It's the very next sentence in the book. And
he's not saying where he left it.
Right. Nobody knows where it's at.
I want to see if that's one of the questions they're going to ask him on the stand.
You think he's going to take the stand?
I don't know. I thought they would at least have to put him up there just for showing. He says, I'm pleading the fifth, and they send him back down. I'm not sure. They just.
He doesn't have to take the stand if he don't want to. Now, if he does take the stand for the defense, he can't stand down for the prosecution, right? He's going to have to be crossed. So, if he goes up there, I think it's in a desperate, you know, they have nothing else to lose. The trial's already looked as bad as it possibly could.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. I think it's one of those factors where there's a lot of missing information that we don't know yet, and there's like a lot of little clues of like, hey, if you just spent $50 on this garment, I don't care who you are, you're gonna take care of it, man. $50 is quite a bit of money for, you know, a jumpsuit that if you're gonna spend something, you know, that you can use multiple times because they're washable.
Yeah. And then you have the fact that, you know, he doesn't come from the most wealthiest of places.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know, it's been well documented how I think his father went through a few bankruptcies. They were hard on their, you know, they've been hard on money, including now. The sisters, I believe, got fired from their jobs or relieved the duty because of the fact that, you know, what Bryan Kohberger is alleged to have committed. So, yeah. But to me, what it tells me is that, you know, if he bought this days before, it does kind of lead to the situation where Howard Bloom says, he was working his way up to it.
Yeah.
Right. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that you have to, man. It's pretty ballsy to know that you're going to a house with multiple people.
It also tells me that all the other times, the 12 times that he was out there, he wasn't there to commit the murders. Obviously, if there was any inclination that he was going to do the murders that night, and it was like a possibility, and let's just say they locked the back sliding door, he would have had his phone off. Now it would have been mysterious if his phone went off in Pullman and then turned on in Moscow on some random night, and it's right there by the house. Like if he would have said, all right, I'm not going to kill him tonight, so I'm turning my phone on right now. That would be an indication of a possible like dry run or a possible attempt. It's probably more like it, an attempt on another night. Right. So that would lead to that. But given the fact that he purchased this jumpsuit just days before the murders tells me that was the first time, in my opinion. Maybe he tried one other time, but I think that was his first time he went out there to try to attempt it. What do you think, Blue?
I think because leading up to it, he hadn't bought the coveralls. I mean, he had ordered the knife months before that on Amazon. And that receipts
in April 2022. Yeah.
And that's the thing, man. Like all that stuff's tracked. I don't get this guy. If he's that smart, you don't buy stuff online if you're gonna commit a crime with you.
Well, here's the thing. They ran what's the word I'm looking for? They pulled the warrants for Amazon and those that purchased the knife, and his name didn't come out. I mean, I'm assuming his name didn't come out, because if it did, they would have figured him out way earlier, because that warrant came out, I think like right after, right after the murders. They're trying to find that Amazon receipt, right? Or did that one come out after his arrest? I'm trying to remember. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I know that they showed that they saw he ordered it from Amazon, but I don't remember them pulling a warrant on who purchased that specific model.
They did. They pulled a warrant on who purchased that specific model because they had the knife sheath. Yeah, that's right. And they did it early on. And if anything came back on that, right, and it said Bryan Kohberger out of Pennsylvania, they're probably going to say, all right, let's see where this person is at right now. Is he still in Pennsylvania? And when they search his name and they comes to find out that they pulled him over in Moscow in August, that's going to perk some ears. Right. Then you're going to say, all right, well, let's look at his phone. We have him pulled over, so let's see what he was doing that night. And, he doesn't come out in the area, but, expand it and you realize that his phone turned off during the night. And then it turns on a little bit later. So now you got a little bit more circumstantial evidence. So now you have enough to go and pull his trash. Now, if they did this early enough, they would have done this while he was still in Moscow. All right.
It takes a little bit of time and the investigation to get the warrants to go through and for the companies to abide by them.
I don't know, man. I mean, yes, on the warrants and stuff. What I'm talking about is I'm pretty sure that those came back within a couple weeks, right? Yeah. And if they had those names of those people, it wouldn't be hard to trace it back to Bryan Kohberger, as one of the persons and him being in the area, right? So the reason it took longer for them to catch him is because, well, one, they were never really on his scent. They had to wait for the IGG to come back to point at him. Once that pointed at him, which was December 19th, which I predicted was the date like a year ago, and everybody said, no. PCA says November 29th and 25th is when they found it. I was like, yeah, that's when they found it, but that's not when Payne knew about it. Payne didn't know about it until December 19th. And I've been saying that for a year. Somehow, some people, they still believe that I don't know things, I guess. Well, anyways, They knew who Bryan Kohberger, or they suspected Bryan Kohberger as being the guy December 19th, and they arrested him, 9 days later? So they built a case on him in 9 days. And out of those 9 days, when did they get to Pennsylvania? The 24th. So out of those 9 days, 5 of them were looking for him and getting to him. You know what I'm saying, Blue? So it's not something that's going to take forever. It's something that's very quick. You know, once you find your guy and you have the right guy, there's going to be evidence of everything. So, like, for instance, if Bryan Kohberger committed this crime, he would have had to have been out and about that night. You know, if you don't have any, evidence of him being out and about that night, if you go and find a door cam from across the street from his apartment complex and you see his car the entire night, then that obviously wasn't him. But if you suspect that's him, then you're going to suspect that car is going to leave at some point. And it does. And at some point, you're going to suspect that car is going to head towards Moscow. And it does. And at some point, it's going to enter into Moscow. And according to the cameras that they have, from the bank and from the, I think it's one of the banks and one of the other convenience stores along the that roadway, Pullman Highway, at some point, he's going to pass into there. And guess what happens? He does. So you can retrace those steps. Now, he did a bunch of crazy driving around and all this other stuff, once he got into Moscow. But leading up to that point, it probably wasn't very difficult to trace him all the way there. You get what I'm saying? So once you got an idea of who your guy is, and if you're right, and it's not like a cold case that there's no way of gathering this information, this wasn't anywhere near close to a cold case. Right?
Yeah, because it was still an ongoing investigation there and put it on the back burner.
Yeah.
It was still an active case when they were working on this one.
Spider says, but no blood, nothing in the car, house, or anywhere. Oh, that's what we're talking about, my man. We're talking about the Dickies, uniform or whatever jumpsuit that he purchased a few days before the murders that can't be found, and how the police believe that he was able to get into his vehicle by disrobing and changing into something else and putting his clothes that he was wearing during the murders into a plastic bag, putting it into a trunk before he enters the vehicle. He wasn't actively bleeding. The victims weren't actively bleeding in his vehicle for people to, I don't know why people suspect that somewhere in some crevice there should be blood. If nobody was actively bleeding in there, it should, where you're going to find blood is just in the spots that maybe on the gas or brake pedal, things like that. And we'll get to some other stuff in a little bit. I want to get to it, but there could be some information that explains why there wasn't blood in the vehicle. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But let's get back to this. The police had looked high and low, but they couldn't find it, just as they couldn't find or locate the murder weapon. Bloom goes on to say it was rumored in the press that they had a receipt for a K-bar knife he had purchased online months before the killings. But as for the actual knife, it too had seemingly vanished. So he puts on there that it was rumored. So what does that mean, Blue? That means either
it's not official release yet, or
he didn't get it from the grand jury. Either the grand jury folks didn't tell that to Steve. If, according to this, it's to Steve, right?
Yeah.
Or it wasn't found until after grand jury.
That could be true too,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I could explain those things. So, but yeah, he puts on there was rumored in the press. This book just came out, so a lot of information is also included in stuff that's relatively like recent. But when he talks about his internet associates and kind of pointing towards that direction as far as maybe who the sources are on this information, that was before a grand jury and around the grand jury time. That was a while ago. So,
yeah.
I don't know how, we'll see how accurate this information is.
And the book's getting around because I just saw a little expose,
Expose?
right? Expose, yeah, on the People magazine like website thing. And it was Howard Bloom's book, and he was in the picture of it and talking about it. So that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool, man. He's doing some good stuff, man. I mean, I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people are hating on the man because of the book, but they haven't read the book. You know, he talks about some of the problems with the defense. I mean, the prosecution, some of the hurdles they're going to have to go over, some of the issues that police and FBI had. You know, it really isn't very biased. You know, it comes off that way because obviously Bryan Kohberger is the alleged killer in this crime. And the focus point on this is through that avenue. You know, it's the PCA. The PCA isn't going in there and saying, oh, there's multiple ways you can, you know, block your signal or whatever, or you could have lost service or whatever the case may have been. It's not defending Bryan Kohberger at any least. You know what I'm saying? So let's see. All right, I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Well, you know what? I'm not. I'm going to talk a little bit about what else it goes into. And this goes to my point as far as how he is not that that biased. He talks about, let's see, all right, right here. Steve had been told that 2 survivors allegedly not only have been awake while the killings had been taking place, but that they had heard everything. More astonishingly, his grand jury sources allege that the 2 girls had been texting each other as the murderer methodically went from one room to the next. Now, do you think that's something that is favorable for the prosecution or the defense, Blue?
I would say it doesn't. I think it might be favorable for the prosecution.
You think it's favorable for the prosecution that the girls waited 8 hours to call 911, that they were aware of what was going on and texted each other during the murders?
Not for the waiting the 8 hours, but it'd be favorable for the eyewitness report of them, you know, her seeing him walk out.
Okay, but what about for the defense as far as them saying something to the effect that, hey, why did they wait 8 hours? Is it possible that they were in on this, or they were aware of this? I mean, there's so many things that can be thrown out there. Now, that only answers one question, right? It doesn't answer everything else. It doesn't answer the DNA on the sheath or the phone being off or the car without the front license plate seen in the area, you know, or the knife sheath or any of those things, right? It just answers that one little possible question. And that's what the defense is going to try to do, right? The defense is going to try to break down the problem and look at it one piece at a time.
But the defense would, you know, it's going to be more like, if y'all think something bad happened, why didn't y'all check and all this stuff? But it's just more character, you know, of the girls and how they were scared or they didn't know what's going on. But the other problem is like the other questions, you know, I'm pretty sure the parents are asking if they knew, why didn't they at least check or call 911 and maybe somebody would have been able to survive that attack, even though by the gruesome wounds, I doubt that. But, you know, if they would have called Tuner, would somebody live? Probably not. But that's out of the picture. Man. I know.
Nah, there's no way that it didn't sound like there was any way possible that those kiddos, any of them, would have survived. You know, the time it would have taken for the ambulance to even get there, even if 911 was called during the murders. You know, from the sound of it, you know, well, in the book it says that Ethan was cut through the neck, cutting the aorta artery. How long does it take for a person to succumb to that?
Less than like 2 minutes or less.
Is there a way to stop somebody from passing if that happens?
I mean, you just got to put direct pressure, but even at that, your brain needs blood to keep going to it, to keep, you know, to keep the brain alive. It's the way it gets its oxygen is through the blood system. So you go more of a chancing brain damage and all this stuff if you can get it to stop.
But it wouldn't be very long.
No, not at all.
All right, what if the person had been drinking that night?
I mean, alcohol thins your blood out a little bit because of the alcohol content, you know.
Yeah, so would you bleed out faster?
There's a potential, yeah.
All right, so the next things that we heard from the coroner was that majority of them passed because of stab wounds to the chest. You know, if somebody gets stabbed with a 7-inch blade, it penetrates the lung. You know, and I'm assuming this is possible because the audio 50 feet away is not hearing screams. Blue, if somebody gets punctured in the lung, would they be able to scream?
Yeah, you can for a while, man. It just into depends if they get both lungs, you know, because you can have one collapsed lung, and then it's going to fill up with blood. You still be able to scream. Yeah.
All right. So, is there a place that can be? I mean, I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but is there a place that can be attacked? Maybe the throat.
I mean, attack the throat. You're gonna hear the gargling, man. There's gonna be some noise. You're gonna hear something.
Right, but like screaming. I'm talking about yelling. Something that can be picked up from the audio 50 feet away.
I would say if he attacked him, he probably hit the heart first. You stop the heart, you stop everything else.
That's true. And then yeah, I mean that's possible. And that would kind of explain why there's no screams, because there's audio 50 feet away.
Yeah,
you hear whimpers, voices, dog bark, a thud, no screams.
I mean, yeah. The thing is, say he walked in and they're asleep, right?
Yeah.
If you're thinking in their mindset, what do? You do two things if you're gonna try to unalive somebody without them screaming. Is you're wearing a long jumpsuit with gloves on, you cover the mouth, and then you attack the chest. You don't do the gut, because guts are slow bleeds.
Right.
You do the chest or throat.
But I mean, you put somebody. If he's covering somebody's mouth, doesn't that make him like susceptible to being bit?
He does. And like I said, that's just a theory that you would put out there. Is if you don't hear no screams, he could cover the potential victim's mouth while he's stabbing him, and that can stop you from screaming.
Maybe. But at the end of the day, like I said, this isn't something, in my opinion, that is beneficial to the prosecution. I think this is more beneficial to the defense. And this is something that he puts in, and this is a clear example of, in this book, he points out both sides pretty good. I think that there's one side a little bit more upset than the other, because at the end of the book, he puts his personal opinion and he puts everything together, and he comes up with a very similar thought that we have all put out there. You know what I mean? So just to I wanted to explain that aspect. Now, this goes on a little bit further, and I want to talk about this one part. And again, I have not asked, I have not spoken, I've not heard, I've not been told any of this is true. But I'll continue. This says the Bureau, Steve informed people he had, so it says Steve informed people had sent an official letter. No, wait, no, let me go back a little bit more. I'm sorry. All right, so it says here, in the aftermath of his startling intelligence, Steve felt that he had no choice but to intensify his efforts. And in that process, he came to believe that the government must have a protected source, an informant who could provide testimony that would tighten the screws that held together the case against Kohberger. Steve was determined to find this individual. He did not want to wait for the distant trial to get knowledge that he needed. For his peace of mind, he needed relief now. And after some digging, he grew convinced that he had the informant in his sights. He was preparing to reach out to this individual to get in this person's face and confront them. He would explain that he was empowered by a father's natural right to understand fully to the last moments of his daughter's life. It was his duty. This was an argument he felt that that no one could reject. But before he could make his move, before he could get to a room and have that heart-to-heart talk with the witness, he was unexpectedly stopped in his tracks by the FBI. The Bureau Steve informed people, so this is multiple persons that Steve spoke about this to. According to Bloom, I am not one of these people that Steve told this to because I've not heard about this. I'm not, Steve doesn't tell me everything either, and I don't ask about everything either. So just want to lay that out with that. I'm not aware of any of this. Steve informed people he had sent out an official letter to that the Bureau had sent out an official letter to his attorney in Moscow, Shannon Gray, warning that if there were any attempts to contact the individual Steve had been pursuing, there would be legal consequences. The witness had originally reached out to the authorities through a tip line that promised to protect the identities of anyone volunteering information, and the Bureau had to honor anyone volunteering information. So, Big Blue, this talks about a potential informant. What do you think, or how do you think this informant is involved in this case? You're muted, buddy.
I already told you everything. Now I have to start over. I mean, there's a few people you might be thinking it might be an informant. Like a lot of people bring it up all the time in our chat. Maybe the DoorDash driver saw him parking. Mm-hmm. That could be an informant, saying an eyewitness. They saw the car, they saw the person getting out of it, and they saw who they looked. Maybe Dylan, seeing him walk down the stairs. It's another potential. Well, you call him eyewitness, not informant. So on her.
This is a secret informant, somebody that we don't know.
Yeah. Well, maybe somebody saw him walk out. Maybe a neighbor is out there, having a couple of drinks in his back porch. Or smoking a cigarette. Some people are weird and they have to smoke all night. They're night, owls, and they're out on their back porch smoking a cigarette. Maybe they saw somebody walk out. Somebody in the apartments.
That's possible, but I mean, here's the thing. If somebody gave up Bryan Kohberger and said, hey, is that guy? And there was a secret informant, an actual secret informant, they gave him up. That's probably going to be in the probable cause affidavit. So this tells me that this secret informant probably made contact with FBI after the fact. Or, it has to be after the fact. Because let's just say it was the DoorDash driver, right? The DoorDash driver probably went to law enforcement. I mean, that's what the probable cause affidavit says. And went to law enforcement, said that they were out there and they delivered a DoorDash order around 4 a.m. Let's just say that person in that process of doing that saw the white Elantra pass and saw Bryan Kohberger in the vehicle, but saw his face, but didn't recognize who he was because this person maybe didn't know who this person was. Now, before they arrest Kohberger, I'm assuming they're probably going to go back to that DoorDasher and say, hey, you said that you saw this guy. Does it look like any of these guys? And do a little lineup, with driver's licenses. And if they picked out Kohberger, that would have been in the probable cause affidavit. Easy. I mean, that would have been real. That would have been huge and explosive. And I think that would have been done before his arrest. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do a lineup after his arrest and his face is known and it's public and everything else. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it.
So it's got to be somebody who maybe witnessed something after his arrest, or maybe realized they witnessed something after his arrest. So who can those people be? It could be his family members. They didn't go to the police before his arrest. Maybe they're the ones that saw him cleaning his vehicle, so meticulously, and they reported that to the law enforcement. Maybe perhaps there is something to them, making contact with law enforcement to tell them about Bryan Kohberger's behaviors. Maybe it's a neighbor, maybe they remember something, hey, I remember on the 14th, the day that we discovered the murders, when Bryan Kohberger came back around the 13th, Bryan Kohberger came back and he was bruised in his arm or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it was a neighbor at the pool party saying, "Hey, I saw Bryan doing some cool party tricks."
That's true too. That's true. Yeah, I know where he can hide the knife. But I'm just saying that it'd have to be after his arrest, right? And it would have to be. I don't think that you would get a lot of information. Well, maybe you could get some information from a classmate, right? Maybe he did do something crazy. Like, I don't know. I think there's rumors he was following some girl around, and other rumors that he broke into somebody else's house and installed cameras after the fact, and they believe he was the one that broke into the house.
Yeah, the one that he helped her set up the cameras after somebody had broken in, right? Because she thought somebody was like spying on her.
Yeah. And then there was some ID cards that were found in a glove inside of a box. Maybe perhaps he broke into several houses and stole some ID cards or things of that nature. I'm just speculating on this. I don't know. But, could those be some sort of secret witness? I think that's about it, right? I mean,
yeah, that's what that, or it could have been, maybe the teacher came, his teacher that he was assisting came forward to say, "Hey, I thought something was up. I reported it. He was acting funny." So maybe just an informant of that way. But it would have to be an informant that had good to use him as an informant. It would have to be something good. No, I think to keep him as an informant, to say, "Hey, this person saw this," but they don't want to be. Maybe he confide in somebody and talk to them about his plan.
Yeah,
maybe somebody online.
Maybe
somebody that he talked to about getting away with one of their crimes, and he's all, "Well, hey, let me run this idea through your head."
Maybe, man. But I mean, if he did that, I don't see him going through the trouble of going through trial. You know what I'm saying? So it can't be like smoking gun. You know what I'm saying? It can't be that hardcore. It's got to be something more like, I saw him cleaning his car like crazy. I saw him, going through his car with this or that. You know what I'm saying? First Last comes up with an interesting comment saying maybe it's a frat member. Now, the reason why I don't think it's a frat member is because, well, we got a few things we got to look at all the evidence, right? If it was a frat member, people are saying that Ethan got in a fight with some guy because he was on roids and he made fun of his manhood. And so the guy was raging out and drunk and tried to fight him in front of everybody with no regard for anybody or any witnesses caring. So that guy...
I sent you the video of the guy roiding out last time, man. That guy was crazy.
Yeah. So this guy roiding out that has no disregard for witnesses, that's willing to do this to Ethan in front of everybody, we're to assume that this person drove around 3 times, entered silently without the sound of rage. This guy being mad, going, "Ethan, get the F out here," banging on things, doing that. None of those things. He's raging. He's raging to the point where he's going to take the lives of 3 others to get to 1. Right. And so in this rage roided fit, he somehow manages to not leave his DNA behind. Interesting take.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I buy it, bro.
All right, man. I actually got to get going tonight, guys. I have to work, but Daniel's going to finish out again.
Yeah. I'm just going to finish this a little bit. Hey, Blue, you're getting a lot of love tonight, my man. You're getting a lot of love tonight.
I appreciate all, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I,
All right,
I
so
am taken. I am taken. So.
There it is. There it is. He's all scared. Not just kidding. Let's see.
Have a good night.
Prosecution stated during a trial that the stalking rumors like that are false in the trial discussing the defense questions or to show media bias. Yeah, but if you go to the court document associated with that trial, it specifies that the stalking was specifically social media following, right? Not that he didn't go to their house. Now, somebody in criminal justice, somebody who has experience in how they would catch you, one, everybody's going to say, well, yeah, you think he wouldn't take his phone. He turned it off, right? So it's also not what caught him. It's something that's going to bury him, but it's not what caught him. Well, anyways, if you were going to commit a crime and you wanted no attachments to you because you're just wanting the thrill of things, which is what sounds more like what happened. When you listen to or you look at the evidence, there's no sign of a break-in, nobody yelling, nobody screaming in anger or rage or any of those things. Somebody went methodically in there one by one and did what he did. You know, those are not symptoms or signs or evidence of somebody who's losing their mind or any of those things. You know, this is something more of a methodical serial killer type person that's committing this crime for the thrill. But you know, you would probably go and choose somebody from the nearby town that you have no association with, that you're not following on social media or any of those things. That way it doesn't get back to you. I mean, if you were to, fortunately, understandably, there wasn't social media back in the day, you know, when like BTK was around doing his things, but you know, he had no connection to his victims either. You know, he found them for whatever reason, he chose them as projects, and then he stalked them and murdered them. Tortured them and murdered them. So I know a lot of people are trying to find a reasonable explanation for this, but when you look at the evidence that's there and the lack of the sounds that you expect to hear out of emotion, it sounds and it looks very much so like this definitely was some, you know, at the very least, spree killer. All right. So I'm going to continue reading this. I'm going to take some calls. We'll see. Let me know in the live chat if you're willing to call in. If I get a lot of people that are willing to call in, I'll open them up. Yeah, that was funny. All right. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was I have also heard about the grand jury. Now, I didn't hear it from the Goncalves family or anything like that, but I had also heard that some grand jury folks had spoken about certain things. And this was my folks that I have that are close to Moscow. And what I had heard was that Strava was going to be a huge component in this case, in the prosecution trying Bryan Kohberger, which is, I think we saw some warrants about it. It's a running app and it does, it has GPS locations, and I think it runs whenever your phone is working or on. So I think that was one of them that I think is going to play a huge role. I heard about the suit out of there. I should have wrote these down. What else did I hear about? This is a while ago, and this is about the grand jury. I think that was it. I think that was it to add on top of this here. I had heard about the break-in at WSU, or the potential break-in at WSU, but what I heard was that Bryan Kohberger was attempting or did steal. I'm not even certain if he did do it or if it was an attempt, but I think it was done. It was luminol, blood cleaner, and some other stuff out of the forensic lab, which is some stuff you would normally find in those places. So that was one of the things I heard from some places too, that may have been. And as far as the secret witness, everybody from Kohberger's sister to the DoorDasher. But as me and Blue were trying to point out and trying to, deduce who it possibly could be and kind of narrow it down, I'm not really sure it's the DoorDasher. Wonder if he had a history of animal abuse. I think so. All right, we have at least one that want to call in. All right, I'll open them up here in a second. Let me do that here in a minute. I have one last thing I wanted to talk about before we open them up. So those are the things that I wanted to say on that, as far as what is in the book and what I have heard. And Bloom says that he heard about the WSU break-in or whatnot, and that if there was a that he was trying to make a bomb. Yeah, he broke into the chemical lab. So he heard something similar to what I heard, but both stories are different. So that's one of the things when you're not getting it straight from the source. You know, there's probably some truth in between. You know what I'm saying? And what is the commonality in that situation? It appears that Bryan Kohberger broke in to something, and it had to do with something criminal. So take that for what it is. All right. So notes on the sources. I wanted to read this. This is after the book is over. It says here, he says, I was determined to craft a nonfiction narrative that made real life actors come alive to the reader, that was propelled by a prism of suspense, and not least was shaped by the storyteller's art. So this story is told in a storyteller format, but it is nonfiction. Obviously, there is some of his own opinion in there. He puts it in the end, and he also puts it in my opinion, you know, and some of the feelings and thoughts that Bryan Kohberger may have had during or just before the commission of the crime. Obviously, I don't know how he could have known that, right? So, yeah, there's no way unless he spoke to Kohberger himself. But on the back end, it says, despite these hurdles, and I think it's talking about the gag order, I did get to the bottom of things, but to tell previously unreported story in this book, I also had to make some compromises. One of the necessity, many of my sources, particularly those in law enforcement or close to grand jury, who provided the most startling information. So here he says close to the grand jury. So it sounds like all his information maybe perhaps didn't just come from Steve. Maybe it also came and he backed it up by others who knew those grand jurors, who maybe they may have spoke to other people. So for instance, let's just say that one of these YouTubers or TikTokers that Steve had spoken to, and I'm going to assume that maybe perhaps this is true, they may have said something to them. It got back to Bloom. Bloom figures out who those two grand jurors are, goes and finds out who their friends and family are, and instead of speaking directly to the two grand jurors, he's now speaking to those that are closely directed to them, and in hopes that if they spoke out to Steve, that they probably spoke out to other people, probably to those that are close to them. And that's probably where he got a lot of his information. So just kind of, that's where I'm kind of leaning on or thinking at this point. I have no real answer, but you kind of just give you guys an idea of how my brain works, so to speak, and how I deduce things. All right. So, it says here, I agreed to this request and I have no choice to honor it, but several of the key individuals depicted in this account refused to talk to me. For example, I did not interview either Michael Kohberger or Steve Goncalves. Nevertheless, I was able to talk at length to people close to them, including relatives, friends, and attorneys. So he's saying that he spoke to attorneys close to them. Kind of sounds like he spoke to Shannon Gray a little bit. Just kind of me deducing some things. I doubt he spoke to, I don't know, Michael Kohberger has an attorney. Obviously, Ann Taylor wouldn't be representing him. Ann Taylor's a public defender out of Idaho. So she wouldn't be defending him for anything, whether it was like some sort of legal action or whatnot. So to me, it sounds like Shannon Gray, the Goncalves attorney. And in addition, there were social media postings, statements to the press and television, and internet interviews that, when were all collected and reviewed, allowed me to document their thoughts and convictions with revelatory accuracy. So he basically saying that he was able to get assume what they were thinking based on their interviews and how they acted and portrayed during those live interviews. All right, give me 1 second, y'all. I'm gonna pull up what I need to pull up. Gotta find it real quick. I'm gonna have to move this over here. All right, let me find my my phone number. It's not really my phone number. It's for the show. So those that call or text this number, I really don't get those calls, to be honest with you. All right, so let me move this over here. Let me pull up something here. 1 second. You know what? I got an idea. I don't need to do any of that. 1 second, y'all. Oh man, what was it? Give me a sec. There it is. All righty. All right. So the phone number is there. Sorry about the delay, guys. I was trying to get all this thing set up. Let me take this off real quick. Phone number is 210-209-9435 if you want to call in. I'll be doing this for probably about 30 minutes or so. So give us a call. Again, this is my Skype phone number. I don't get phone calls here. So I don't answer it if it's not on the...
Hey, bud.
Oh, hey, how's it going? Who do we have on the line?
This is Amy from Texas.
How's it going, Amy from Texas? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk to you about all this.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Give me a specific question because there's so much.
All right, we'll start off with the big question. Do you think police got it right or wrong?
With Kohberger?
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely think he's guilty. I definitely think that there's been some shady stuff on the prosecution's part, but I also feel like that there's logical explanations for everything that we are not privy to.
Yeah, there's quite a bit from what I understand. There's quite a bit of information that we don't know. Majority of the things that we know, we can deduce from the PCA, which is majority of what police probably knew prior to Kohberger's arrest. But there's two facets or multiple facets of the investigation. There's, the investigation immediately after the arrest. The investigation trying to figure out who the perpetrator is. And then you have the arrest, and then you have the post-arrest investigation. Now that you know who your guy is, you get your warrants and you try to figure out when did he purchase this or that. And, we only know up until the point, and probably about 60%, 70% of the information that happened before the arrest and everything else afterwards. I mean, it's just us kind of sort of deducing from paperwork and maybe perhaps getting some sources close to the case. But I do agree that I think there's quite a bit there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just like you have to be the most unlucky person in the world. I know you've mentioned that before, and I do believe that kind of along the same lines as you, that he was wanting to commit some kind of really high profile crime and then, become a PhD and teach about it and get his little kicks from that. I do believe that that's what his ultimate goal was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's kind of shocked that he got caught, but he also, knew that it could be a possibility, and he took, major strides to try not to get caught, but he did make several mistakes.
Yeah, he sure did. A couple of the mistakes that he made, he took his phone with him. Right. So to me, the reason why I believe he took his phone with him, I don't think he ever actually intended on turning it on. I think that he got nervous about either the noise that that was created, although it wasn't very loud or any of those things. There was some noise, thud and whatnot. There was other people in the house. Did they hear that noise? Maybe perhaps Dylan did yell. out and say, be quiet, or whatever the case may have been. But I can only assume that during that moment, he's probably, in tunnel vision, and kind of like anything else. If you're focused in on something and then somebody asks you a question without, first trying to grab your attention by calling out your name or something, you're probably going to miss probably the first part of that message. And if the message is only 2 words, like shut up, you may have only heard just noise, like somebody yell. He may not have been aware of what was going on. And so he probably knew that he had to leave. And, regardless of anything, he's a human being, and human beings, curiosity kills the cat, right? We've all heard that.
Mm-hmm.
If he had some sort of device in his phone or on a laptop or something of that nature, which required his phone's hotspot or something, for him to be able to listen to, or maybe perhaps he had something on his phone that would allow him to listen to maybe 911 dispatch. What a lot of people don't know is that all the 911 calls went through Pullman. And so he, being a TA in the criminology department, wonder if he had certain access to things, maybe login information as such, to be able to listen in and tune into dispatch. And maybe he was trying to listen in and see if anybody discovered his scene.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I do believe that the target was one of the girls, Maddie or Kaylee, up in the top bedroom. And when he heard shut up, he could have assumed that it was Xana. And I just truly believe that he had no idea that Dylan was there. Like her room looks like a little closet door, and the way that she was, positioned when she saw him, I don't think that he saw her. I think he was exhausted, and he was like, I got to get out of here. And he just walked right past her. And I truly believe that Dylan will be a big key in this, and that probably after they knew who he was, they probably, before he was arrested, showed her like a photo lineup. And I truly believe that she's going to be able to identify him. And you mentioned the DoorDash driver earlier as well. And the secret informant, I go back and forth with that one. I do believe it could be a family member.
Mm-hmm. I got a question. Kind of curious. Have you ever done any running racing or anything like that?
No, I don't run.
So
there has to be like a clown with a knife chasing me, and then I might give it a try.
The reason I say that is, when you're in a race and you're running, and those that run probably can they have the same feelings as I do. So when you get close to that end, and you can see the finish line, kind of focus in on that. You focus on your exit. If Bryan Kohberger was, focused in on leaving in that moment, he's going to focus on his exit. So those things that are beside him, or perhaps somebody, I don't think the door was wide open. You know what I mean? If you go look through a crease in your door, and you put your eye to it, you can see quite a bit. And if somebody walks by it, you can see their entire body. You'd see if they had bushy eyebrows or not. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the door was wide open. But even if it was, if he was focused in on leaving, and from Dylan's testimony, it sounds like he was on his way out. That's good. Tunnel vision is real. I mean, he's not a robot. He's not a god. He's not perfect. In fact, he made so many stupid mistakes. I find it weird that people think it's odd that he got caught, given how many mistakes he made.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
and also, I mean, I do believe that he was probably tipped off by people because he was such a weird guy. And, you can't always believe, oh, well, I knew he was a murderer or whatever. But I think people knew that there was something seriously off with him.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't tell me that at least one or two, maybe 3, 4, 5 people didn't think, man, and he drives a white Hyundai. This guy's weird, and I bet he got some calls about him, in the tip line. I really do.
I wouldn't be surprised. There was some concerns about him at the nearby university, some concerns about his behavior towards women. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tipped that in and it'd be taken seriously.
Yeah. And then, I just think it was like everything just kind of came together.
Mhm.
Could there have been some shady stuff done by the prosecution or the investigation? Yes. But I think that the YouTubers that are out there that are pro burgers, I mean, they're just like delusional. I mean, you cannot tell me that all of these things, lined up and this guy's innocent. It just doesn't make any sense. It defies all common sense. However, I do believe that two can exist at the same time and that there were mistakes made in the investigation
Mhm.
and possibly some shady stuff, you never know. But I think they got their guy, and I really do think that anybody that was in law enforcement in that city, they truly wanted to catch the right person, and they're not trying to frame anybody. And overall, I mean, there's a few bad apples in law enforcement, of course,
Mhm.
but overall, these are good guys that they want to catch this guy, and they don't want to be made to look like fools.
Well,
So this is their guy.
yeah. No, I mean, obviously they didn't just target Bryan Kohberger. Howard Bloom speaks about some of the other suspects that they had before Kohberger. The fact that the defense brought out that the law enforcement had to secretly take somebody's, cigarette bud to test for DNA tells you that they investigated others. So I don't see that. But I want to thank you for joining us. I appreciate you calling.
Thank you so much. I hope everything's good after the hurricane up there.
Yeah, here it's not so bad, but out on the coast, it got pretty crazy. So, but here it just kind of rained a little bit, cooled down some, so it wasn't too bad. But the coast got hit pretty good.
Yeah, we did. You can imagine where I'm from. So.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, we did, but it was lovely talking to you, and I really appreciate everything you do. I appreciate your channel. I really enjoy watching you guys and listening to your perspective. So keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate you. You have a good night.
Okay.
832, you're on the air, but give me 1 second. So Holly asks, now here's the thing. Daniel, answer my question as to why Steve Goncalves said Bryan Kohberger didn't need to go upstairs. I think it would be good if Daniel restated his answer because it was really good. Well, obviously, I think that if Bryan Kohberger was going in there and his sole goal was just to be mass murder and he was going to kill anybody, he would have probably started in that first level that he went into. The fact that he went straight up to the top and directly onto the third floor tells us that his target was probably on the third floor. At the time, you got to remember what was known at the time. What was out there was that Kaylee had significantly more injuries than Maddie, and that would usually lead someone to suspect that that was the target. So he was trying to basically say, people aren't trying to say that there's a target or one person, because that would mean there was collateral, right? And nobody wants to be anybody in that situation. But I mean, could you imagine the guilt also that, or not even the guilt, but like what some of the other families maybe could feel, saying, thinking that, their child died because somebody else was targeted. So I think that was something that was trying to be kept out, so to speak. But yeah, I think there's a good chance that whoever this suspect was on the, or whoever the target was on the third floor. Now, me personally, the reason why I think that Kaylee had more injuries was probably because of the layout of where the two girls were, right? So you had, if Kaylee ends up on the wall, right, in the corner, that typically means that she was probably in between Maddie and the wall. Their heads were probably facing obviously towards the wall where the corner would be. So their feet would be towards the doorway. And as he entered, the person that would be right there would be Maddie, first to target. And I believe she didn't have many injuries because he could target her precisely and hit her where he wanted to. Kaylee, it sounds like she woke up during that deal and started to back up, and he didn't have the I don't want to say luxury, but he didn't have the luxury of attacking her while she was motionless, and so he had to do it as quick as possible, which is probably why the ferocity of those injuries were significantly higher. But good question. Thank you so much. 832, you're on the air. Who are we speaking with?
I assume I'm 832. This is Holly.
Oh, hey, Holly. I was reading your question. So, did I answer your question?
You did. Well, it wasn't really a question. I just did it to edify everyone in the stream. Because although I don't agree with your opinion, I did feel that it was really good. So I didn't want it to get lost in all of the things with the case. So I wanted to have you restate your opinion as far as the answer to that question. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
The reason, and I appreciate you as well, your response, we have conversed a couple times in writing. This is my first time to call in. Please forgive me. I'm not feeling well as well. I have a migraine coming on, so I'm not trying to rush through this, but I just don't feel well.
I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you feel better.
Oh, thank you. Tim Collins just asked, so what's your take, Holly? So the reason I'm calling in, I have followed this case since day one, meaning since I first heard about it, because it just really caught me off guard. I'm like, why, who, where, how? And so with regard to Kaylee and the Interview Room, another YouTube channel has also had the Goncalves pronouncing their names correctly on their stream. And I have also seen, I want to say News Nation has quoted, as well as other channels as well, Steve Goncalves saying he didn't need to go upstairs. So here's my take on your opinion. And I'm going to back this up. And again, forgive me being brief. I just don't feel well. So I'm trying to skate through this for the benefit of the stream so other people can call in. So Kaylee Goncalves, she loved Murphy. He was her baby. And I do not believe for a second. Let me back up. Maddie was much more intoxicated than Kaylee, judging from the food truck cameras, as well as, what did you say to Adam? Well, I told Adam everything, that whole thing. She obviously was more far gone. So it does not surprise me at all. On that point, I do agree. BK did not have to fight to take her on. Maddie went up there in her bed alone. And I believe that Kaylee went in there to check on Murphy because he had been alone that whole time. I mean, maybe he went out, he had to go potty or whatever. I mean, I have animals. So Maddie was getting settled and she had her fill. They got some food from the food truck guy. We all saw that. And I think she went up there, got settled for a little bit, and then laid down. So true. That's why I think that her wounds were not as intense. However, Kaylee's room being right across from Maddie's room, no doubt she heard noise coming from that room. Now, whether or not Kaylee meant to close Murphy up in the bedroom, I don't know. But what I do know is, for whatever reason, Kaylee, I feel, was alarmed. And so she got up, closed the door behind her, and went to go check on Maddie because they were like sisters. For people new to the case, Maddie and Kaylee were like sisters. There actually is a Facebook page called the Goncalves Family Page that I really recommend you guys follow. There are some pictures you will not see anywhere else, videos, etc. So, naturally, Kaylee went in like the protective mama bear to check on Maddie, see what's going on. I fully believe that she walked in on BK attacking Maddie, and that was the source of the noise. And Kaylee, I believe, went in full force, dove in to defend Maddie, tried to save her with every bit that she had. And that is how she cornered. She dove into that bed. That is how she got cornered, into that corner. I don't doubt that she was found that way. But
do you think
what
that
I'm saying,
do you think that she fought the assailant?
yes, no doubt. That is why I believe, and I have followed this since day one, seen many channels say, various opinions. So I need to be heard on this point to be considered. That, I don't have contact with my full blood sister, but I have lots of BFFs that I call sisters that I would do the same. So in a lot of ways, I can identify with Kaylee.
Mm-hmm.
And if I heard any potential reason for alarm, I would go in there swinging with no consideration for myself to save them and do whatever I could.
Well,
and that is why I fully believe that Kaylee's wounds were, what was it called? Gaping wounds or gashes?
Yeah.
Or both. That is why I believe that Kaylee's wounds were worse. And I do not understand why I'm crying. Maybe it's because this is very personal to me, but I can fully understand why Kaylee loved Maddie so much that she went in and she died trying to save her. That is my contentious belief. And that is why her wounds were worse. I do believe Maddie was the target. I disagree with a lot of what Howard said. I am not going to go into that. I have not read the book. I don't intend to until the trial is heard, but I absolutely want to read the book when the trial happens. I want to consider what he has said, but not before the facts, because I am easily sucked into all of these rabbit holes. That is just my own convictions. But on this point, that is why I believe that her wounds were worse than Maddie's. And that is why I believe he went right up there. So that leads to the question, and I'm interested to see from the chat. He obviously, however he went in, went right upstairs, right to Maddie's room. She was first. So that leads me to believe he knew the layout of that house, right? He knew. He knew where she was.
Well, maybe. So let me interject a little bit. So Maddie's room is probably the most visible room from the back parking lot area. So that would make her a very easy target. When it comes to Kaylee defending or jumping in the pile, from what I understand, talking to Christy, Kaylee's bed was still made. So she wasn't sleeping in her bed that night at all. And if she defended in the manner that she said and scratched, pulled, clogged, or whatever, there would be more DNA left behind. The fact is that the only DNA that they found was the DNA on the sheath. Because if they found DNA underneath the nails or blood or any of those things on a body, that would have been used 100% more than DNA on a sheath when it came down to the probable cause affidavit. That would be significant evidence versus the touch DNA that they found on the sheath. So when you put all those three things together, the fact that Kaylee and Maddie grew up as sisters, basically, they were not strangers of having sleepovers and things of that nature since they were very little. The fact that they've been intoxicated, and I'm not going to say that one was more intoxicated than the other. Both of them look pretty lit. There's moments there when Kaylee's trying to take pictures of Maddie and she's stumbling around. So I think they're both pretty intoxicated. They both were up there. They're having some girl talk. Maddie saying, "I told Adam everything." It was Kaylee who was saying it so loudly. Like, "What did you tell Adam?" And that's usually a symptom of somebody who's intoxicated and loud speaking and things of that nature. It didn't come off as violent or anything. It may have seemed suspect because of the situation that occurred later on that night, but during that moment it sounds like boy stuff. And then you find out that she's calling and Maddie's calling Jack DeCour from their phone. Howard Bloom kind of talks about it a little bit, talking to Christy and them. It kind of makes sense as well, that one of the reasons why Kaylee went back to Moscow obviously it was to show her friend the vehicle, but she still had significant feelings for Jack, and I think she wanted to hang out with him. She went out to the corner club. That's a guy's bar that he was going to be at. You know, you don't purposefully go to his bar unless you want to see him, and they're seen together.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I have to agree with your wife, by the way. She says, I speak loud and I'm never drunk. I'm the same way, Steelers, because I'm soft-spoken. My husband actually often complains, as does my almost 14-year-old son, youngest of 3, by the way. My oldest is 30, believe it or not. I am soft-spoken. So, yeah, I get you on that, Steelers. So thank you for that.
No, but
Giggles, I have seen what you're talking about as well.
Yeah, but that, you know, my wife is saying that, but that's also a symptom of when I tell people, you know, everybody in the Border Patrol speaks Spanish, but not everybody that speaks Spanish is in the Border Patrol. So there's a little bit more to Kaylee possibly being drunk, other than the fact that she's speaking loud. You have the videos of her being at the bar, or pictures of her at a bar, a place to consume alcohol, and you have her visually acting intoxicated on screen. So her being loud in that instance is a symptom of being intoxicated, in my opinion.
I'm not saying that Kaylee was not intoxicated. I never said that.
Right,
I just said that Maddie was further gone.
Oh, that's possible. I mean, it's possible.
So,
I'm not certain that can be determined. I mean, I think they would have to probably go through the blood alcohol level concentration, and to be you might actually be right, to be honest with you, because like Maddie's a little bit thinner, and usually it doesn't take much for a thinner person to be more intoxicated. So you may have a point there.
You know, eventually they would be the same, probably, right, if they consumed, you know, for their body weight. But yeah, Maddie would have showed symptoms sooner. So back to my point about Murphy. If Kaylee intended on sleeping in the same bed with Maddie, like going to sleep and whatever else, no matter how far gone she was, judging by the videos, that's why I referenced the Goncalves family page. In the videos I've seen with Murphy, all the things with Murphy, with Maddie, and with Kaylee, you know, they were gone at the food truck. I mean, so, you know, full disclosure, you know, Kaylee loved Murphy. She would not have left that dog alone to just, you know, have to hold its pee until she got home. So it's like, you know, she would have taken the puppy out, and then, you know, Murphy's going to want to play. Now, do I think that the call out by Dylan was saying, you know, thinking that it was Kaylee playing with her dog, was Kaylee actually playing with her dog? No, I don't. And at the end of the day, Daniel, you said it best in a previous stream, that we don't have all the evidence, and it's really hard to hold ourselves from speculation to, you know, read into what we don't know. It's really hard because we want to know, and there's nothing wrong with that. We want to know. But I fully believe that Kaylee came out swinging. She walked in there not expecting to see what she saw, and in an instant she reacted out of instinct. That was her sister, in her opinion, and she went in, and that is how she went. And for that reason and many others, Kaylee was such a beautiful person, and she did what I think anyone in their own human nature would have done, seeing a loved one in distress.
Right. I don't doubt that she may have attempted to fight back. I just don't think that it was her coming in from another room. I think she was in the bed with Maddie, and Maddie, obviously, in my opinion, was the first to be attacked. You know, from the sounds of it, not just from the book, but from the things that I have heard and spoken to and know, she was the least, what's the word I'm looking for? Had the least injuries. You know, you had, I think everybody else had some form of defensive wounds, except for, I don't think Ethan did. Yeah, I think he was.
Xana, she had some fingers that were almost severed. So before I end my call, because I do want to give someone else a turn, because I love hearing other people's opinions. You haven't stated this stream so far, and I realize that you probably have some new watchers on. So for the benefit of all watching, in a previous stream, and I followed you for quite some time, you did state, you did kind of dive in a few times on different streams. how you feel the whole interaction with Xana and Ethan went down.
Mhm.
Who was where? What caused BK to interact? Did he go in there intending there, or did he react out of seeing them on his way out? People may be wondering about Dylan. I personally feel like if it was him, he was in a frenzy. He didn't even see Dylan. That's my own opinion, but that's not my question. My question is for you to circle back and restate for the benefit of anyone onlooking. How did Xana and Ethan go down with BK?
Got you. So I have heard from sources, Christy told me that early on, before the gag order and stuff, while law enforcement was talking to them, that police had suspected that the intruder entered through the back sliding glass door and only opened the glass sliding door once, left it open during the entire time the murders had occurred, and then left out of the back sliding glass door, never touching it again.
Right.
What that told me was that this person was thinking about leaving DNA behind. This is probably something that this person would have written down, similar to the Long Island serial killer, where he wrote down all this, blueprint. Kohberger probably had something very similar. Long Island serial killer was an architect. Bryan Kohberger was in criminology. So I think he'd probably do some things probably a little bit more advanced than what Rex Humerman was able to do. Well, I digress.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons, in my opinion, if he's not opening it and closing it, is because he does it every time he touches that door is an opportunity for him to leave his DNA behind. So if he opened his door and left it open, and if police also believe that, it's probably because Dylan or Bethany also probably told him that it got colder throughout the night. So what I think happened is Bryan Kohberger entered in through the back sliding glass door, made his way up to the third floor, and in the commission of committing the murders, he either Xana heard him or felt the draft that came about. Either way, she got up and walked towards the kitchen. Now, for Dylan to think that Xana was Kaylee, there's a few reasons. Do they sound the same? I don't know. But maybe perhaps it was tone and loudness of the voice. If somebody's talking from down the hall and, quite a bit away, they're going to probably sound further distant than if somebody's talking directly above you. So if she's hearing a voice that, someone here, and it's relatively close, she might assume that it's Kaylee. So if Xana walks over there, maybe perhaps it's the draft, maybe perhaps she's hearing some of the same noises that Dylan's hearing, and she sees the back sliding glass door open. She's going to say, I think someone's here. She's going to turn around and walk right back to her room. Now, we've heard rumors that there was locks on that door and that Xana's dad had just went and fixed them. So she would have had to Bryan Kohberger would have had to have entered that room directly behind her in order for that door not to lock. So he had to have come up behind her during that process. My assumption is, and based on the things that I know, is that I think he incapacitated Xana in that moment and then focused in on Ethan. Now, I've seen things from the crime scene that I can say that Howard Bloom's description of Ethan possibly being cut in the throat is very, very likely. Based on some things that I've seen. And, that being said, he probably then focused back in on Xana, and maybe she was coming too. I don't know. But she had some defensive wounds. I heard it wasn't necessarily the fingers being cut off, but I heard that the knife went through the palm. So very similar. I mean, both could be the same, but I don't know. I don't know which one of those are true. It very well could be the fingers. It could be the palm. It could be both.
And I'm sorry to interject. I do have a quick question because I do have memory problems as part of my chronic health problems. Who was found where? Xana versus Ethan, where were they found so far as you know?
From what I know that both of them were on the floor. I don't know exactly where they were positioned. So I've heard two different things. So Christy had told me that during the celebration of life that Hunter Johnson, and it's in the book too, that Hunter Johnson had went up to Steve and told him what had happened. He got a phone call. He went over, he discovered the bodies, and he called 911. Now, what Christy told me was that the door was blocked, but she got her information from Steve. And I can only assume, based on the reaction of Hunter Johnson during that ceremony, and this being his daughter, that these were probably two emotional men. And I can assume that maybe block got heard instead of locked. They just fixed the locks. So I think that there's a possibility that he was blocking the door. Blues said that if somebody gets hit in the aorta, they can survive for about a minute, maybe two. If that's the case, then it's possible that he did crawl and got to a position where the door couldn't open. But what I did hear was that there needed to be force used to open the door, whether it was because it was locked or blocked. They had trouble opening it. And he saw what he saw and then said, we got to get out, and called 911 off of Dylan's phone, and the rest is the rest. But so far as I know, I just know that both of them were on the floor. I've heard it was Ethan's blood that may be the ones that is on the back of that of the second story building that was dripping out of the back.
Oh, wow. I've heard often it was Xana. Yours is the first, that it may be Ethan. Okay.
Well, if his neck was slashed and he didn't, he didn't get many other injuries, and if his body faced kind of towards that direction, I guess there is a possibility that majority of it would come out of one direction instead of like going everywhere else. So in that one direction, that flow would make it go out in one way. I think that if you had multiple stab wounds in multiple places, the blood would seep out of your body, obviously, from those other locations, versus one where your blood is pumping, directly to your brain. That's the artery for the brain. Yeah, that's a lot of blood that's going to be pumped out that direction.
All right. Well, one thing I do want to finish with is for any onlooking, and I never knew any of these victims at all, but I am a deep feeling person, and so this case is very close to my heart. Xana specifically, because we're talking about her. There is a video out there. I do not know who put it up, so if you look for it, I'm sure there's many out there. But Xana was a fantastic gymnast, and I saw a video of her about a year ago put up on YouTube, and she was just, it spotlighted Xana, and she is so beautiful. She was such a beautiful person, and she was so skilled, and so it showed her doing gymnastics on the mat across a long way, and I was like mind blown. It really personalized Xana for me, and she just was just amazing. So I could come across with many other questions, but I really super appreciate your opinion, Daniel. Thank you so much for your time. I am going to go ahead and end this, unless of course you have any questions for me. If not, that is completely cool. I just want to let other people have the floor. And thank you so much for hearing my feelings on this and my opinion. And I love what you guys are doing here, for real.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate your words and your call. You have yourself a great night.
Thank you.
Bye. If anybody has any, comments, if you don't want to come out here, put a couple of stars. I've already starred a few of them that people have put some stars on, so that I can, I'll be able to answer your questions. So I'm going through them pretty quick. So if you didn't put any of those little asterisks, I probably didn't see it. And all staged. I don't know if you're talking about this case. Tim says the PCA says Xana was seen on the floor, but doesn't tell us about Ethan's positioning. That's true. And one of the reasons I thought that, after talking with Christy about the potential of the door being blocked, was if they actually had to move him to make entry into the bedroom, then the positioning that he was in wasn't the position that he was, his final position. So maybe that's why they kept that out of the PCA. But that's just me speculating 100%. I wouldn't know. But it was something that I also was like, man, I wonder about that. Pick us up in Discord. Let me see what picture you're talking about, my man. I'm glad I saw that. Let's see. Let me go to Discord real quick. Yeah, no, I see the bed where it looks like that. I've seen that before. But I think that was done by law enforcement going through things. According to Chrissy's mom, she wasn't in bed. That they went directly into, they were in Maddie's room. But yeah, I saw the picture about the bed looking unmade or whatever. I think that was law enforcement trying to figure out some stuff. All right, so let's go through some of these. I wonder why Steve Goncalves said BK didn't have to go upstairs. Yeah, I think that he at the time was assuming that his daughter was the target, and he was like, don't make me be the guy that has to say this, that it was my daughter that was the target. And I think that's what he believed in. And that's just my speculating. I have not asked him this question. I really don't ask him questions like this about things. Sometimes I'll ask him questions about, hey, did you hear this? How true is, did you hear that? But I don't go into details about injuries or any of those things, or, what their thoughts were in that situation. Was it because of the injuries? Because I don't want them to relive that, to be honest with you. Not just for me to, for my purpose of getting information. I don't think it's worth that. So just out of respect to them, I haven't asked them any of those type of questions. But I assume at that moment, based on some of the things that he was saying in interviews, that he probably had a suspicion that his daughter may have been the target. I think I'm not clear on whether Kaylee was actually sleeping in her own room or not. I mean, it sounds like she wasn't. The evidence doesn't point to it, that she was. I know, like, they put a picture of her bed being unmade, but law enforcement went through that house and moved a lot of things. So, to my knowledge, it was still made at the time of the discovery of the bodies. What's up, Kim? She says, DM had to have heard that if she said she heard talking. I'm not familiar what you mean. I read that she was calling him because she wanted to get back together, but that is not a fact at all. Just something I read. Christy believed that they were on the path to getting back together. She thought that was a high possibility. They've been together for so long, and, she'd gone on a date with somebody else who disrespected her. And immediately she was, realized that what she had was better in Jack. And so it sounds like she was definitely trying to get back with Jack. D. Evans says, I believe allegedly Kaylee had a lot of DNA under her nails, but the cover-up was real. Law enforcement wants that DNA out. All of them will be sus. It was allegedly about drugs, sex, and trafficking. Well, I mean, the thing about that is that all of their toxicology reports claim that they didn't have any drugs in their system. None of them. None of the victims. Not one of them. 2, why would law enforcement say, hey, there's no DNA under the nails? What would make them think that, oh man, we can't look at this DNA under the nails right now? Because it would have been collected when the coroner and the bodies were transferred in. That would have been collected there. And that would have been, that DNA, if any was under her nails, would have been entered into CODIS. You can't just delete things that you enter into a national database. Those things are there for forever. So, if they put it into CODIS and it came back somebody they didn't like or somebody they really like, oh man, we got to protect this guy, they can't pull it out. That's impossible. Plus, I don't think it would be the Moscow, Idaho, forensic lab that would be taking care of that situation. It'd probably be the Idaho State lab, not the Moscow police lab that would be taking. Sorry, I may have said that wrong. I don't think it would have been the Moscow police department, their forensic lab taking care of their evidence tech, taking care of that type of evidence. That would have been the Idaho State Police forensic lab. And I'm not sure what motivation they would have in somewhere else that has no relation to Moscow. I'm not sure why somebody would want to discard evidence in that situation. For what purpose? Even if it was for a shady police officer, like a lot of people think. So in order for this to have been some sort of like cover up, okay, we got to ask ourselves a few questions. And nobody's called, so I'm going to go ahead and put the calls out. So I'm closing the Skype. I won't be getting any more calls, and I do want to talk a little bit in depth in this one. So, when, who, what, when, where, and why are the things that need to be asked when such an allegation comes up, right? That the cover up was real. All right, so the forensic lab or the forensic team, the Idaho forensic team, are the ones that collected the sheath and took it back in for evidence, found the DNA, and then submitted it into CODIS. Now, the question would be, why would they frame Bryan Kohberger? Why would police frame somebody? I know a lot of people say, well, maybe it's because it took too long for them to find a suspect. And the university was like, hey, blame this on anybody, right? Well, the problem with that is that the DNA, unless the University of Idaho has decided at 6 p.m. on November 13th that enough time has gone, you haven't found a suspect, we need you to find somebody, and just anybody. Unless that happened at that moment, it would be impossible if it happened a week later or 2 weeks later or a month later that they're saying, hey, you've had a month, you got to find somebody. What are they going to do? Go get Bryan Kohberger's DNA, go into the CODIS system and replace his DNA sequence with the one that's in CODIS at the time, and nobody noticed it in a national database that is run by the federal government? I'm not entirely sure that's plausible, my man. So you got that situation, right? So in my opinion, it couldn't have happened. The frame, if it happened, couldn't have happened after Bryan Kohberger's arrest. So they would have had to have framed him before. Before the murders. It couldn't have happened after the murders. It had to have happened before the murders. And they would have had to have planted that sheath with Bryan Kohberger's DNA on it during the commission of the murders, right? So the question comes is, why Bryan Kohberger? A PhD student, you're going to frame this guy, PhD student next door. Like, how do they even know who he is? I know a lot of people say, oh, he applied for the police department, but he applied for Pullman Police Department, not Moscow. So how does Moscow even know? Did they go, all right, we're going to go through a list of the people we gave traffic tickets to or warnings to figure out if we can find a suspect to blame on this murder that these cops are about to commit, right? Because they got to plant his DNA during the commission of the murders for this to make sense. Well, it doesn't make sense, but for it to be logically possible, right? So how do they do that? Nobody else can find his DNA. The guy's walking around with gloves. If he didn't commit this crime, we would probably think that was not an uncommon thing, right? That he'd been doing it for a while. So he's walking around with gloves. Police can't get his DNA when they're trying to, but yet when they're trying to just frame anybody, these local cops, the FBI couldn't do it, but the local cops found a way to get his DNA and plant it on the sheath and decided to frame him for a quadruple homicide for 4 kids. For what? Why are the cops doing this to them? Is it because they have loud noise complaints? Is that the whole purpose? Like, man, we gotta put an end to the loud noise. Even though there's loud noise at Jack Core's house, at the neighbor's house, and at Sigma Chi's house, on all down the block on Greek Road, we got to specifically target this one. We need to take them out. And at the same time, we need to take out Bryan Kohberger because what? He's going to take their job or something when he becomes a super cop? Doubt it. I doubt they're thinking that, like, oh man, we're worried that Bryan Kohberger is going to be a super cop. He's going to take my job. He's going to be the chief of police. I'm never going to have that opportunity to be there. You know, the FBI probably thought the same, like, oh my God, he's going to end up being the director of the FBI. We can't allow this. So we have to also, you know, be in on this frame job. Right. Right. That's the only, you know, this story keeps making sense for you. Really? I hope not. I hope it doesn't. Because if it really does, I don't know what to say. Now, you know, when they came to the idea of framing somebody, they thought Bryan Kohberger. Why? Because because he's an outsider? Well, Brett Payne, I don't think he's from Moscow. I think he's an outsider. You know, he looked like the best likely fall guy when you have a whole list of people that have been arrested for a bunch of different crimes throughout you know, recent years. In fact, they brought in a guy. Remember, there was a guy that tried to stab his wife. He had cuts on his arms. He lived about 4 blocks south of where the murders took place. In fact, in the direction that the white Elantra would have been going. That guy's not a good fall guy. He was also a convicted murderer. He had been convicted of murder before. He's not a good fall guy. But the PhD student in Pullman, that's your guy. You know, making a murderer is what, Steve Avery, right? Now, I don't necessarily believe that he's innocent or not, but why do people think he's innocent? Because there was the history of there being some issues between him and local authorities. Yeah, he'd been a thorn in their side. I think there was a personal issue between him and a specific sheriff and some other stuff. He'd also been a guy that had gotten arrested a few times, and so he was well known to the police department there. So if they would have, you know, framed him the initial time, people were saying that that's why, right? You know, and then the second time was because, oh, he's suing him. The thing is, there's reasoning behind why somebody would suspect that someone would frame Steve Avery in these 2 murders that he'd been accused of. One of them, apparently, he didn't commit. You know, he was freed on that one, the first one, and now the second one is up in the air, right? But none of those circumstances that exist as to why Stephen Avery was possibly a target for a frame job exist with Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger wasn't from the area. He didn't have a problem with any other police department. He wasn't a guy that was constantly being arrested or any of those things. So, I mean, unless you're just believing things, which we're having to make this story fit, it just doesn't make any sense, like at all. But I appreciate the comment. Mikey gifted a 1 Drunk Turkey Show membership. Thank you so much, my man. And you know they exist, became a YouTube member. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to go through these questions real quick, or any comments. I'm going to see if I see any stars. If I don't, all right, I saw one. Let's see. All right, in the PCA, they pointed out the bathrooms and also mentioned a pattern that led them to believe it was only one person. Do you think there's significance in the bathrooms washing? There could be. I don't personally think that there's anything there. But perhaps, I mean, they do bring up a bathroom. As far as, you know, the pattern that led them to believe it was one person, it was probably had to do with like a mixture of, you know, blood and where that blood was at. Like if it was in the wound, so that you can tell that or determine that blood transfer came from the same knife, right? And you also have probably, you can probably determine like the knife getting deformed as it goes through every person, right? So when a knife hits like bone, it's going to deform that knife. And so the next wound is going to be different than that one. And until, if he hits another bone, then it's going to deform it as well. So there might be a situation where they're like, all right, we see this deformity here because the blade bent, and we see the same deformity there. You know what I mean? So there's quite a bit that could determine why it was, one weapon. Also, when the blade hits bones, there's like micro fragments that are left behind. You get a magnet, you pull them up. You can test them. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if you can get it with a magnet, but you get them something you can pull them up, and then you test them to figure out, if they came from the same knife. It wouldn't be that difficult to do. But the bathrooms part, yeah, you got me on that one. I'm not sure about that one. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to go through these as fast as I can. So I got some Fortnite to play with the homies. Me, Jaime, my buddy Hugo, my buddy Jonathan. We play Fortnite at night. Why would Kaylee leave Murphy in the bedroom if she didn't start sleeping in there? Just a thought. Well, I mean, they went out, right? At 10 something that night. I think it was reported. I'm assuming that they probably took the dog out before they left. And I'm assuming that on nights where they don't party or are out at 2 a.m. and the dog is asleep and they don't wake up at 4 a.m. or 2 a.m, that they're probably going to let the dog sleep throughout the night. I don't know if it was a common thing that Kaylee woke up in the middle of the night to take Murphy out, especially in the freezing, icy temperatures that were outside. I spoke to Christy. They said that, and I know there's an interview where Olivia says something to the effect that Kaylee would have taken, Murphy out. But I asked Christy specifically if they've actually seen that footage, and they said they have not seen any footage of Kaylee taking out the dog, and that what was meant was that Olivia would have believed that Kaylee would have taken the dog out as soon as she got home. But I don't, the family's emotional, especially at that time early on. I'm not sure if they're putting all the, the dots together that it was 2 a.m. It was a good chance that he was probably asleep in her bed, and let him sleep. When I go out to the bars, and I know it's anecdotal, but I have a few dogs. When I go out, and it's not very often, I honestly don't go out very often, but when I do, and I get back, I mean, if my dogs are asleep, they stay asleep. If they wake up and they're like, excited or whatever, I'll let them go out. But that's also like in Texas where it's not icy and freezing, because when those situations happen, my dogs don't want to go out when it's icy and frozen. They'll hold it and wait. So, just food for thought as far as why I think Murphy was in the bedroom. I think he was just asleep and she left him there. Yes. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate that. BK was giving frat boys bad grades. I don't want to be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. If he was, it wouldn't be the frat boys that are at Sigma Chi for Pullman, University, or the University of Idaho. I'm sorry, Pullman University. It wouldn't be the guys from the University of Idaho. It'd be the WSU fraternity folks if he was giving bad grades to them. So I don't know if, the two would ever like meet or anything like that, or have any real reason. You know what I'm saying? The Bethany exculpatory myth was about rumors of an alternate versions of events. I heard that it was because something about seeing a naked guy running out, which doesn't really exclude Bryan Kohberger, unless she said that the naked guy was Hispanic or African American, 5'3" and 300 pounds. If she said it was a taller white guy, that doesn't exclude him. In fact, I think that in the book, and from what I understand as well, police theorized that he was wearing a jumpsuit, a Dickies jumpsuit, and that he took it off. He disrobed before entering his vehicle, so that would make sense. And then when you hear also exculpatory being thrown around from Ann Taylor in the manner that she throws it around, I really think it loses a lot of weight, the word and what she's saying. And my reasoning being is, like, for instance, when she said that there's no video of Bryan Kohberger or the White Elantra leaving Moscow, heading down I-95, and there's cameras in that area and they don't catch the vehicle, and that's exculpatory. However, there are multiple ways to get to Genesee or where Bryan Kohberger's vehicle was when his phone turned back on from that neighborhood in the King Road neighborhood without going through that intersection. In fact, if Bryan Kohberger did any camera recon and try to figure out where the cameras were and saw that there were, cameras at that intersection of Palouse River Drive and 95 South, he probably isn't going to go that direction. He's going to avoid that direction to be seen in a camera that is probably able. I mean, one of those cameras from the security cameras, those are the cameras that you can, from the traffic cams, those are the cams that you can modify and magnify and look in and clear up. So he probably didn't know that Moscow doesn't record those. And he probably wasn't going to take the chance and knowing that they don't record them. So he probably avoided that intersection altogether anyways. So he wasn't going to come out there. And I've gone through that entire route that I suspect that he went through. And from the King Road residence all the way back to Pullman, given the route that we are given in the PCA. And when he leaves that neighborhood, there isn't another camera that would capture him until he's in Unionton, Washington. The rest of the way, there's no cameras, just fields. There's nothing out there. You know what I'm saying? He's not going through towns. He's not going through cities or any of those things or stoplights. There's nothing there. It's just fields of like agriculture. So, yeah. All right. Moscow Idaho has a Walmart. Oh, he went to his local one in Pullman. Just going close to one that's close to him is kind of weird. Yeah, I thought that was weird, but also taking your phone with you and turning it back on and, leaving the sheath behind and, all those other mistakes he made were kind of weird too, but he made them. He's not perfect. The mistakes that he made were during the commission of the murders, wasn't during the planning of the murders. It wasn't the post-murder planning or cleanup of his vehicle. Those are the things that you can expect somebody to, maybe be a little bit more efficient in because there's less stress in those moments than actually committing the murders. So when it comes down to like no DNA, possibly dextering his vehicle or figuring out a way how to take, this robe and put something else on so that way he doesn't trace DNA into his vehicle, a location to leave the items, hide them somewhere out there in the middle of nowhere and go back to them the next day. All these things were in efforts to elude the investigation. Let's see. When I called Daniel, I said he didn't feel well. Either way, even if she was just laying down, I don't think that's the case. She was making calls with Maddie to Jack DeCore. So my assumption is they're probably together. If not, that's actually Kaylee calling Jack on Maddie's phone. So 3 something in the morning, two girls that are intoxicated. They're like sisters. They've probably shared a bed before as like, like a sleepover type thing. I just don't find it uncommon for both of them to be in the same bed. In fact, if you were to ask Big Blue and Jaime before Steve came out and said that they were both in the same bed, when I heard about this murder and I heard about their relationship together, I had theorized that they were both going to be in the same bed, that they were asleep in the same bed. They were making calls to the boyfriend. They were drunk. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. They've known each other their whole life. They've probably had sleepovers. In this situation here, they're together. She'd been gone for a while. She came back that weekend to show off her car. She wants to hang out with her friend. Yeah, she probably fell asleep with her in bed. So I told that to Jaime and Blue, and about 3 weeks later, it came out when Steve said it. So, yeah. Let's see. The 2 men DNA near the girls inside. Well, it wasn't really near the girls, right? So let's look at how the defense words certain things, and then it'll ask us and give us reasoning or question why they don't word other things, right? So there was 3 DNAs. Right now, they were very specific about one. It was outside. It was inside a glove. All right. But the other two were inside the house, somewhere in the area near two of the bodies. They said near two where the deceased were. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean right next to him? Does that mean 10 feet away? Now, they described the other one super detailed because it benefited their case. Now, I would think that they would describe the other set of DNA in efforts to benefit their case as well. So you would put something vague if what you were looking at really doesn't benefit your case. If it did, you'd be more descriptive, right? So the fact that they're saying they're somewhere in the area tells me that's the closest way that they can describe it. Because if it was really nearby, I would have said in arm's reach or very close or in proximity to the bodies or on the bodies. You know, that would be beneficial to their argument. So you gotta figure out how, or not figure out, but you have to see how, you know, these lawyers are wording certain things and saying certain things, and you have to compare it to what and how they say things about other pieces of evidence. And that'll give you an idea of how strong they believe that evidence is. Now, those DNAs were unknown at that time. In a recent hearing, after the hearing, and I'm sure a lot of these, you know, pro-burger channels didn't really show this part, but the prosecution came up and said that they've done extra DNA tests at the request of the defense. So what DNA was the defense arguing about? The three unknown. So we can deduce that those DNAs are no longer unidentified, that they have done the test needed to be done, which is one of the reasons why I said Bryan Kohberger made a mistake in waiting for this to happen. You know, he should have gone to court right away. Prosecution didn't have all their evidence. And the evidence that they had at the time, I think, could have shadowed some reasonable doubt. You know, if the defense comes in and says, we have 3 unidentified DNAs, and they have their witness saying, hey, you know, this, you know, GPS thing or these pings don't make sense, blah, blah, blah. You know, the prosecution wouldn't have had the time that they had to argue it now that they've had that time to either discover who those DNAs belong to, and also maybe perhaps fix, if need fixing, those discrepancies that occurred with the GPS, right? So, which I'll get into a little bit as well. If they would have done that then in trial and said, hey, you know, they had this Ray or Ray, and they had, you know, these 3 DNAs, I think that would have been in the benefit of the prosecution. I mean, the defense. But now that those aren't unknown anymore, and perhaps that if there was something needing to be fixed, could be fixed before trial, and they still have time, which is something the prosecution said that they still have time to fix those things. I think Bryan Kohberger's defense team screwed themselves, maybe jumped the gun with their defense a little bit, because I think the prosecution is going to be able to fix a lot of those things, including the unknown DNA and maybe perhaps even the things that Ray said. Now, what was Ray's argument, right? That there was missing testing, or they didn't test, you know, cell phone behavior inside the Moscow house, and that they didn't do a test run between Pullman and Moscow. That there was a lot of tests from in or around the King Road residence, very close to it, but not inside. I'm not sure about you guys, but I never read, or I didn't find or see in the PCA that Bryan Kohberger's phone was on during the trip from Pullman to Moscow. In fact, I believe it says at 2:40 something, it turns off. At 2:50 something, he's seen on Nevada Street. So it was off before he left Pullman. So even if the prosecution were to go out there and do this test to determine how cell phone behavior acts between Pullman and Moscow, what are they going to compare it to if Bryan Kohberger's phone wasn't connected to the network? And the same could be said for inside that house. If Bryan Kohberger's phone wasn't turned on inside that house, and they go inside that house, even though it's no longer available, they go in there if they could, and they can get this DNA or this data. I'm sorry. And they're like, all right, we got this data. We got this test. We got the testing, the test drive. We got it. It's right here. It's right here. All right, let's compare it. What are they going to compare it to? Bryan Kohberger's phone wasn't in there. So when Cy says that it's exculpatory because his phone locations are exculpatory because they don't put him inside the house, they don't put him somewhere else either. And if they did, you know, I know there's a lot of cheerleaders nearby that like to say that, oh, Bryan Kohberger wasn't near there, or yada yada yada. Well, if they truly had that, do you really think Bryan Kohberger would be sitting in jail for the next year, or do you think his attorneys would be yelling for bail and to bond this guy out at the very least because of this evidence? And do you think that if it really truly did exist, that it would have been heard in that trial? Because before that hearing, Ann Taylor came out and said that we're going to hear, or Cy is going to testify, and I think it's documented too, and we highlighted this. It was documented that Cy was going to testify that about Bryan Kohberger's Wawawai trip, taking pictures, you know, in the moon set, whatever the case may have been, right? That was what he was saying. He didn't testify to that. Now, what he did testify to say is that the day or two before that hearing, that Moscow Police Department turned over some data. And now they're not arguing, or he at least wasn't arguing, that he wasn't at Wawawai, or that he was at Wawawai Park at some point. And he didn't argue that he was at some other location at 4 a.m. Because remember, I think the wording said that Cy was going to be able to prove that Bryan Kohberger did not head towards Moscow and that he was not the vehicle that was seen at the Floyd cannabis shop. Well, he didn't testify to that. Where did that testimony go? If you guys have seen Cy testimony on that, during that hearing where he was talking about his life story, if you can point to me in that area where it says that, I'll be glad to, you know, change my mind and read this statement. It's not there. It's not there. I didn't say two outside. I said there was one outside in the glove and two somewhere inside the house. Let's see. Did Steve G say BK's phone connected to the King Road house Wi-Fi? Well, he said that in an interview. I've asked that question, and the answer that I got was something to the effect about there's cast and it's in the probable cause affidavit. I'm not understanding where the connection is between the cast, what's in the PCA, and Bryan Kohberger connecting to the Wi-Fi. So that's what they told me. I don't see the connection though. But Steve is an IT guy. He might know something more than I know. So, but when I asked about that specific question, that was the answer that I had gotten. Daniel, but I thought you was the COD father. Oh, Call of Duty. Nah, man, I actually don't play Call of Duty very often, to be honest with you. I'm trying to lose weight. Maybe that's it. Been working out here recently. There are other possible routes. Yeah, but there is. There's a few routes actually to get to where Bryan Kohberger's phone was on. So when Bryan Kohberger's phone comes on and it's down there and Ann Taylor's yelling, oh man, this screams exculpatory, I start to lose value in what she thinks exculpatory is. That's just my opinion. I mean, you take it for what it is, but if somebody's telling me that's evidence of something and it's really not evidence, I don't know. Towards the end, my dog wouldn't want to go out in the cold at night anymore. Instead of waking me up several times at night, when she needed to go out, she would sneak down to the basement. I got an older guy that does something similar. My buddy Capone, he's like 10 years. Every now and then he'll do the same. Alrighty. I think that's going to be it, guys. Well, I appreciate everybody that tuned in. Please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Ring that notification bell. If you agree with me, let me know in the comment section. If you don't agree with me, let me know why in the comment section. But please be respectful. If you're out there doing some crazy stuff or saying some crazy things, I will block you. I don't need to hear or listen to any of your comments if you're going to be rude and disrespectful. Simple as that. So if you want to get your point across, and it's valid. And even if it's against what I'm saying, as long as it's respectful and in a good manner, I'll leave it there and I'll actually probably even answer your question. But if you're coming at me with a bunch of insults and things of that nature, well, you won't be commenting anymore. So with that being said, guys, I'm out of here. You guys have a great night. We're going to be back on Sunday, I believe. I'm not sure what time it was, but we will be back on Sunday. And we're going to be talking about some other things that have been in the news recently. So you want to tune in for that. With that being said, we're out of here, guys. Peace.